Okay, everybody, thank you very much for joining me today. What I want to do is go through a data model. And in the data model, I'm going to share with you the history that we've been tracking for Airbus and Boeing with their orders and deliveries. If you have any, the sources are the OEM reports. We've also had third-party transaction data that we use to verify. This is particularly useful when we look at MAX deliveries, because MAX deliveries are specific to a model. In other words, MAX 8 or MAX 9, whereas when people put in orders for the MAX, typically all Boeing will report is a MAX was ordered. If you have any questions, this is how you reach me by phone. This is how you reach me by email. And yes, I would be delighted to hear from you. As you can see, we have 21 pages here, so we have to jump forward and press on. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or if you want, unmute yourself and stop me where I am, and we can talk around about what we're doing. So, okay, first thing is we want to look at the big picture. Here we see orders. And this is orders over the period. Light blue is Airbus, dark blue is Boeing. And we use the term gross orders here because gross orders is the most accurate description. There are many airlines that will order one model, but take delivery of a different one. Now, this happens particularly with the 737 and the 320 family. If you're an airline or a lessor, you order the small one, because that comes with a small deposit. And then when the time comes to, as they say, cut metal and start building your airplane, you upsize to the bigger airplane. So gross orders is something of a signal, a sort of a flag of what might happen, but generally it's not the most useful number to look at. The real useful number is deliveries. Now, when John Leahy was at Airbus, he used to always be at pains to show everybody this line, how steady the line is. Obviously, the pandemic changed everything. But essentially, what we see here is Airbus is a much steadier delivery rate, steady increases over time. Boeing had a bit more ups and downs. On the model, if you go anywhere like this, you can see the actual number. Same here. Let's go to the next page. What we have here is comparison of gross orders. And this page shows you Airbus over here and Boeing over here. And you can select a year. So 2022 obviously is 1 month, only January. And therefore we have limited information, but of course we can see Qatar Airways, Airbus has already took care of that choice for them. You can see that in the case of Boeing, there is the BDS tanker, the Navy P-8. You'll see in Boeing's published information, you also see lessors. Airbus is much better about this. They will show you the lessor and who the operator is going to be. Boeing doesn't show that. It'll only show the lessor and not the customer, unless the customer buys direct. And also, as I was pointing out here, with the military stuff, Boeing shows that quite clearly. Airbus does too, but is much less prominent in military deliveries. So if we go back to 2021, just as an example, in descending order of deliveries, you can see who Airbus's big customers were in that year. Same thing here for Boeing. And obviously, when you see Ryanair, you can see the MAX was really impactful for them. The next page is the orders map. Again, select a year and it'll show you in the map of the world, and you can drill down like that, or if you have a mouse with a wheel like I have, you can drill down and you can see, for example, down here, it was Chile, JetSmart for 23, LATAM for 28. In South America over here, it was Gol Airlines for Brazil for orders. And you can move the map around like this to see it. If you're interested, obviously, as I said, stop me, we can talk about it. The next page is delivery, same logic, pick a year. Let's go with 2021 because you can see Airbus had a nice year for deliveries. and China was particularly effective. You can see here, China for Boeing was a tough year because MAX. Okay, so the next page is going to be single aisle competition. In the single aisles, again, the light blue and the dark blue, and you can look at gross orders and then actual deliveries. And what you see here, obviously, is very big impact of MAX in these 2 years, not just the pandemic, but MAX. What you also see here is over time, Airbus has been delivering a lot more airplanes. We're going to get back to that in a few minutes when we talk about the breakdown. But you can see that Airbus was really picking up, steadily moving ahead. Orders are what they are. Of course, this was an awkward time for Boeing with no MAX business to move forward with. Twin aisles, this is a much stronger place for Boeing, as you can see in terms of deliveries, done very well. A lot of that is military stuff, the tanker, and of course freighters. That's a very strong play for Boeing. Orders, you can see that, and if you've been following the industry for any time, you know that twin aisle orders have started to slow down. And in fact, we see a negative here and a negative there for Airbus. Here we show a bit more specific. So for example, this is twin aisles for Airbus, and we can click on a year, let's say 2022, well, let's go back to 2021. You can see the model, the number of orders, the number of deliveries. This is the descending order by delivery. And then we have descending orders and descending deliveries. And what's lovely about this model, this technology, is that if you click here, it'll tell you which airlines actually ordered and took deliveries for the period. No questions, I'll go on. For Boeing, twin aisle, same thing, model, orders, deliveries, and who were the orders from, and who were the deliveries going to. Now, for example, we see, remember I mentioned to you that Boeing does not split lessors and actual operators. So we see, for example, Novus Aviation Capital, Atlantis Aviation Group. These are not airlines. This organization is obviously a buying agency for a country. And then, of course, we have the standard unidentified customers. We have to wait for that one to become more apparent in third-party tracking when we eventually see who it is. You might say, well, which airplane is it? We can click on here and we will see what, okay, that unidentified customer, 747-8, it's likely that that is an Air Force One airplane, ultimately going to be an Air Force One airplane, because who else is ordering that airplane? Single aisle for Airbus, 2022, same thing. You can see the models. You can see here is the Qatar Airways problem, shall we say. Interesting thing to see here is that in 2022, the 220 continues to attract attention. It's just the right size airplane, I guess, for the period. And if you look, we click this one, you can see it's actually Azora that did the order. And we can see here the deliveries, the 29 deliveries for January. And if we go back to 2021, we can just get a sense of what it looked like then. 500 orders last year, which is amazing given the fact that we were recovering from the pandemic. And the deliveries were great too. No questions, I'll carry on. Next, we look at Boeing single aisle, and we can see here the non-breakdown. When you have an airline like Allegiant, where they described MAX 7 and MAX 8 that they were going to buy, great. Southwest announced when they ordered more MAXs, they were specific. They said MAX 7s, and they've also said MAX 8s. So in that case, it helps to identify, but most of the time, Boeing does not identify the customer model that has been ordered. Generally, the customers do that. And what we've done is be able to go back. So for example, here we can see 599 orders last year that we weren't quite sure what they were going to be. Some customers were announced. We know who that one is, Southwest Airlines. But when we get to deliveries, it's much easier to identify which model actually got delivered. So if you look at the MAX 8s last year, those were the actual customer that took delivery. But again, with Boeing, you find the lessors show up as the delivery customer, not the operator. Takes a while for us to catch up with that. Okay, next one is orders by family. And what we do here is we split the activity into all the 737s. Or in this case, we also split out the MAX 737s. And we split out the CEOs from the NEOs, because I think that's kind of important at this stage to see. And in Airbus's case, you can see the orange is the 320 neo CEO, beg your pardon. Very important part of their business. And then the CEO was obviously replaced by the neo, and you can see how that has grown. But look at this, because I think this comes back to the chart I mentioned earlier about how Airbus started to accelerate. This airplane, the 321 neo, 38% of their orders went down a little bit, more than half, 30%, and this is during the pandemic. Last year, 73% of the single aisle orders, I beg your pardon, of the orders at Airbus was 321 neo. This is only January, so let's not get too excited about that. Very important, just keep that as a data point as we proceed here. In terms of Boeing, 737 MAX, hugely important to them. And clearly, the absence of being able to deliver MAXs over here was I beg your pardon, being able to take orders. Nobody was going to order an airplane that was being parked. It really impacted them negatively. But again, orders are not the thing that we really want you to get too focused on. Orders by type, here we see freighters, military airplanes, single aisle and twin aisle, and you will see that the single aisle here is like graphic evidence of how important the single aisle market is for these companies. This is literally your bread and butter. Now, I've told you not to worry too much about orders. However, realize that the bread and butter for Boeing is the MAX, just like the 320 family is for Airbus. And you can see how much pain the company must have gone through. Those 2 years, you can see the bounce back here. But still, this period, I don't know how they ever catch up. It's going to be fascinating to see how Boeing does that. Just to point out, we don't sell airplanes, we don't sell engines, we don't have a horse in the race. We wish everybody well. Now, let's look at comparing Neo versus Max in orders and deliveries. And you can see here what the impact was for Boeing during those Max, the 18 months that, or 20 months that the Max wasn't happening, so to speak. And you can see what advantage Airbus picked up over the period. This may give them literally an unassailable lead. I don't know how, as I said before, I don't know how Boeing catches up. A critical point, you've heard me mention this a few times, another data point to remember, when we look at deliveries of the Airbus 320 family, the 321 neo is 32% of deliveries. The equivalent at Boeing is the MAX 9, only at 9%. The market is giving us a very strong signal. Just going to say that you'll see a bit more of that next. When we look at Max versus Neo in deliveries, what happens here? Look at this. Look at this advantage. It becomes very difficult to catch up. And by the way, Boeing's Renton factory is one factory, and they deliver I think it's 2 planes a day at their peak. They were pushing 2 new planes out the door every day, which is really amazing. I'm just seeing 2 questions in a Henry's got does it show with operating less at least 2? Henry, can you just clarify which slide,
Sorry, yeah, this was for the earlier slide when you were clicking through the deliveries by model, and then it showed the lessors and then
Okay,
the
I'm going to try and get there.
operators.
Okay, here we are. The Boeing one or the Airbus one?
The Airbus one.
Okay, here we are. Airbus twin aisle, Airbus single aisle. Which one are you looking for?
Well, it doesn't matter, but what my question was, you have them all aggregated. So is it meant to be just aggregated on the total level? For example,
go ahead.
For example, if you clicked just a 320 Neo, for example, you'd get a list on both lessor and both customer and on operator, but are you able to distinguish between the two within the results that show up?
Well, here we are in 2021. I've clicked 320 Neo. This tells me who the customer was, and here's the operator. So those are Avalon put in orders, and these are the companies that actually took delivery, meaning that's the operator of the airplane. Does that answer your question?
No. So if you clicked Avalon, is that possible?
Let's see. I have not thought about that before, but it's a great question. Okay, yeah. So Avalon Aviation Capital Group ordered 40. There was one delivery to an undisclosed customer. Avalon ordered 30, no known customer name. LATAM Group obviously feeds themselves. Let's have a look. Carlisle Aviation Partners, Malta Medair. No, so in fact, it's not showing us any connection between. Well, I don't think we're ever going to be able to connect an order in a year to a delivery in a year. So if we take off all the years, we say 320 Neo, and we pick SMB Aviation Capital, where did they go? Did they disappear now? Okay, here we are. They have ordered 115, 5 have gone as deliveries, but we don't have a disclosed customer name. Let's see, Synergy Aerospace, it's also undisclosed.
So Edison, those aren't in the year they were ordered either, right? They were,
correct. Right. So Air Lease Corporation, if we go 320 for where's Air Lease Corporation now? Here we go. We don't know who the airplane went to. So I'm hoping that answered your question, Henry. We don't have that granular level here.
Yeah, for orders, but it looks like not even for deliveries. We have that. We don't have the granular.
Well, this is weird. Why did this go all weird on me? Yeah, so that's a good question. I would have to think about how I would connect that. But perhaps we can when we get nearer the end here, there's some more information along the that might be helpful to that.
Okay.
To that question.
Thank you.
No, that's great. Thank you for asking the question. So let me go back. I think I was here. Sorry, it took me a long time to see your chat. Okay, so where I was with Neo, and I said, look at the advantage that Airbus has picked up over time. But here's the critical thing for me, jumps at me. Look how much of the deliveries are now 321 Neo. And if we look at it, the Boeing figures, the equivalent MAX 9 is not picking up the same amount of acceleration. I don't know what term to use, but it's not happening for them at the same level. I think it's a very telling thing, because if, for example, you could say, I think that people would make this argument that I need a middle of the market airplane, and the only game in town really is the MAX, I beg your pardon, the 321 Neo. Game theory tells me that creates a very unbalanced, unstable market. Airbus does not have to discount so much because guess what? They don't have to. But if I'm Boeing and I have to get the customer to take my MAX 9 and down the road the MAX 10, I have to become much more aggressive. We're hearing this anecdotally from people in the industry that Boeing is very aggressive on pricing right now, which seems to reinforce what I'm thinking. When we look at actual deliveries, two different colors for the CO and the NEO, and you can see clearly what's going on here. These last few deliveries here were to basically, I think the last 321 COs were going to Delta. And you can see clearly not only growth overall, but there's a big swing here to NEO. And I kept these two y-axes equal, so you could see the size, the relative sizes of them, and you can see how much Boeing is falling behind in the single aisle middle of market, which is basically the MAX 9, the 900, the old 757 and the 300 and the 200. Now look at this here, and you'll see, obviously it's gray because you can't buy them anymore, and no one's taking deliveries, obviously, but they were king of the hill back here. They invented the segment, and then just seem to have left it. It's a very interesting, I think there's got to be a case study around this down the road. So here's, I think, one of the most important charts that we have. And by the way, we want to try and do this presentation once a month when we get updates. So if you're interested in that, please do contact me. MOM deliveries, single aisle. You can see Boeing was a player and then increasingly less of a player. Came back with a 900 ER. People like that airplane. But then that dropped off very quickly. The 321 just kept on going. And here's what we see. 2000, Airbus was -4 in the market, -14. But look at this. Every time there's an order, it goes green. And if you deliver, obviously, then your backlog isn't growing. Our estimate is basically at the end of January, Airbus has an advantage in the segment over 1,600. Now, from what I've seen in this industry, if you want to launch a new airplane and you have 1,000 orders, you launch 1,600. That's an incredible lead. And I was talking to Christian Scherer from Airbus at the Dubai Air Show, and he was saying to me that one of the problems I have right now is I can't deliver. I can't offer anybody a slot. There's just no delivery slots available until much further out. And when we saw the MAX order from Allegiant, one of the things that Maury Gallagher said was delivery slots on the 220 were just not available. It's a very interesting thing that game theory tells us this is a very unstable business right now. Very, very scary. I remember not Guillaume Faury, but his predecessor saying at an event at Airbus that it's very worrying to have an unstable oligopoly. And of course, game theory tells you what happens when you have instability. It becomes very worrying. So if we look at deliveries, and the MOM, for me, it's very clear that the MOM segment is a happening thing. Middle of the market is growing. So gross non-MOM orders versus gross MOM orders. And you can see the MOM order is, every year there's interest. But here's the market share. So the dotted line is the average. Every time the blue line goes above the dotted line, there's growth. And there's been a lot of growth since 2018. So again, this is January, ignore that. But clearly the MOM segment is growing. And if you don't have a MOM product, you're at an inherent disadvantage. That's what it would seem to me. Here we have a split. Now, I had, every time I do this presentation or show the model, I learn something from the audience, as I did today. And a previous demonstration, a showing of this model, someone said to me, please, can you split out the military stuff? So I did that. And what we see here is Airbus military really is a one-trick pony. And that's unfortunate because really there are a lot of people, a lot of governments flying 319s as government-owned airplanes. But they get sold under the ACJ, which is the Airbus corporate jet. And so they don't show up necessarily as a military customer. Boeing has BDS, Boeing Defense Services. So when you buy, let's say, a 737-800, which becomes a P-8 or some other version, the C-40 for the US Air Force, it's a commercial plane, but the customer is a government entity. You don't see that as much with Airbus on the single aisle, but you do see it in the 330-200. This is the one name, but you can see here the other names of for companies or organizations really that have taken delivery of the A330 tanker. Now, if we go to Boeing, you can see, look at the size. There's the Boeing tanker. There's the 737 version, which is militarized, either as a wedge tail, as a C-40, or a P-8. And you can see here the models, you know, P-8 for Norway, P-8 for Australia, P-8 for the UK, P-8 for the Indians, US Navy. So it's very interesting. So the US Navy, if we click on this one, for example, we can see the US Navy has a lot of 737s, and those are not necessarily P-8s. They're, you know, the C-40 version, the passenger version. No questions, I'll carry on. We're getting very close to the end. This has gone very, very quickly. So if we look at the Airbus backlog, and I think, Henry, maybe this is where it's going to come back a little bit more to where you were asking me questions. So if we look at, let's say, 320neo, this is when the order started. And you can see as they deliver, the backlog starts to shrink. But this is what we estimate the backlog to be at the end of January. Now, who are the customers? What did they order? How much has been delivered? And what does the backlog look like? So you can see there's a huge amount of undisclosed. And here we see who the lessors were that have orders and taken delivery. And here we see operators, orders, and deliveries. Now, I'm sure there's got to be somebody with a question here of what this is showing. Don't all shout at once. Anybody want to tell me which model to pick? Okay, so we'll move on then to the Boeing one. I had 787-8 here, but for example, it's 787-9. You can see here over time, backlog kept growing, and then they started delivering, and that's where we are now. We estimate that to be the backlog of 342. The 787-8, great backlog growth, but not so much since. There's a little spike here, but that airplane seems to be, shall we say, not having as much momentum. Now, what I want to show you something interesting here. In 2015, we saw fewer orders, but when we go here to the -10, in 2015, we started seeing pickup here in interest. So it's obviously the bigger airplane started to maybe take some attention away from the slightly smaller model. And it also is interesting because Boeing is now talking about the -9 higher gross weight and the -10 higher gross weight, which will be more capable. So I think that we can expect this interest to continue. If we look at freighter market, this is really the most amazing freighter airplane. We've done some look at the economics, and it's a remarkable airplane. Its performance in terms of payload is very similar to the 747. So it's a very impressive airplane. Here we see the military tanker. You can see how that's gone over the period. The 747-8 had a good start and then very quickly aged. Pretty much exactly what you would see if we go back to the 380. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is actually my presentation. So I don't know. Yes, sir.
Edison, can we see the MAX 9 and then go back to the A321neo?
Sure. Here's the MAX 9. Now you're going to say, well, where were the orders? Okay, so that's a good question. I have to figure out why orders are not showing here. And it may be that when we look at MAX, really the thing to do is go like this. All the MAXes, because Boeing doesn't show you when a customer orders a Max, they don't order a Max 9, they order a Max. There are as I mentioned earlier, there's very few times when a customer announces which model they're going to order. So Max is a very mysterious, cloudy kind of thing. So Michael, the best way I would say is look at it this way. Now, if we want to look and compare this with the Neo, we would have to say 320 Neo, 319 Neo, 321 Neo for a comparison.
Right.
To make sort of an equal thing. So we would go this one, this one, this one.
There's also the delivery effect here, right? Because Airbus has been delivering.
Correct. Absolutely. So if we go back to this one, so here we have a 6,000 plus backlog. Here we have a 5,300 backlog. And you can see that, well, they're behind in deliveries. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And the Renton factory is capable of producing these airplanes at incredible rates. But the problem is, if you don't have you don't do your own delivery inspections anymore because the FAA wants to inspect everything. Guess what? You just can't deliver that fast. So you make them, but like you're sitting with 787s and 737s that have to be inspected. So it puts them at a disadvantage. But that's a good question. Thank you for that. Any other questions? All right, everybody. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today. I appreciate you being here. And please let me know. You all have my email if you'd like to come to the next one. Have a great weekend.